The billionaire leaned in and asked, "Can I kiss you?" That one kiss changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. Rain hammered softly against the tall glass windows of a luxury penthouse in downtown Seattle. The skyline shimmered under the storm, city lights bleeding into the wet night like spilled gold. Inside, Adrian Hale sat at the end of a long mahogany table, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. A single silver folder rested between his hands. Across from him, Lena Moore shifted nervously, the hem of her worn blazer still damp from the rain. She had been summoned there by text. No explanation, only an address and a time. Everything about the place screamed power. The marble floors, the quiet hum of the air system, the faint scent of expensive whiskey and cedarwood. Adrian's voice finally broke the silence. "Miss Moore," he said evenly, "I'm going to make you an offer that may sound insane." Lena blinked, clutching her purse tighter. "An offer?" He slid the silver folder toward her. The paper inside was thick, embossed with gold lettering. "Marry me," he said. "For 3 months. It is a contract, not a love story." For a long moment, all she could hear was the rain. Her mind scrambled for logic, but none came. "I am sorry. What did you just say?" she whispered. Adrian leaned back, calm and detached. "You need money. I need a wife temporarily. This marriage will help me secure the merger my board is pressuring me to finalize. You will be compensated very well." "Onzen?" She laughed once, short and disbelieving. "You are serious? You do not even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You were laid off from my marketing division last week. You have outstanding medical bills from your mother's treatment. You have integrity, Miss Moore. That is what I need." Lena froze. The humiliation of her recent firing still burned. Her mother's hospital had called just that morning, warning her the next payment was due. Every word Adrian spoke landed like a strike to her pride. "So I would be. What? A convenient wife?" she asked bitterly. "A contract partner," he corrected. "No expectations, no emotions. You sign, we marry, and in 90 days, we part ways." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the sharp lines of his face. There was something almost sad behind his composure, something he was not saying. Lena looked down at the document, 3 pages, dense with legal terms, and a simple signature line waiting for her name. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why me? You could hire anyone." "I do not hire wives," he said softly. "And after what happened to me last year, I do not trust easily." The words hung heavy between them. Somewhere in that sentence, she heard pain real and buried. She swallowed hard, her pulse drumming in her ears. "This is crazy," she muttered. "You are out of your mind." "Si one humbre." "Perhaps," Adrian said, "but you have until midnight to decide." He stood, buttoning his jacket, and walked toward the window. The reflection of the city lights flickered over his face. Behind him, Lena stared at the contract. The storm outside raged harder, as if echoing the war in her chest. She could walk away. She should walk away. But the hospital bill waiting in her inbox would not disappear. Neither would her mother's weak smile, or the landlord's notice taped to her door. The clock on the wall ticked, each second heavier than the last. Finally, Lena rose from her chair. Her hand trembled as she picked up the silver pen resting on the folder. "If I sign this," she said quietly, "you keep your word?" Adrian turned, his gaze steady, always. The pen met the paper with a faint scratch. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, and with it, an unspoken truth neither of them dared admit, that some deals begin in silence, but end in something dangerously close to love. The clock read 1:30 in the morning when Lena finally left the penthouse. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but her mind was a storm of its own. She walked the empty streets of downtown Seattle with her coat pulled tight, replaying every word Adrian Hale had said. "Marry me. 3 months. No emotions. Faizwo." By the time she reached her apartment building, her shoes were soaked through, and her chest ached from holding her breath for too long. The elevator was broken again, so she climbed the 5 flights of stairs, each step echoing like the tick of a countdown. Inside her small apartment, everything was still. The leaking faucet dripped steadily, the refrigerator hummed weakly, and the blinking red light on the answering machine pulsed like a warning. She pressed play. "Miss Moore, this is St. Mercy Hospital. We need to confirm the next payment for your mother's treatment by Monday morning. Please call us back." Her throat tightened. The deadline was less than 3 days away. She opened her purse and emptied the contents onto the kitchen table. Her wallet, a bus pass, 2 crumpled bills, and a stack of unpaid notices. A cold draft crept through the window, brushing her skin. For a long moment, she just sat there, her hands over her face, silent. Lena's mother had been diagnosed with a heart condition 6 months ago. Since then, every day had been a negotiation with the universe. How many shifts she could work, how much she could stretch one paycheck, how long before the landlord finally changed the locks. She had thought she was strong enough to handle it, but tonight, even her strength felt rented. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. Adrian Hale. "The offer expires at midnight. Take care of yourself either way." She stared at the screen, reading it over and over. His tone was cold, but there was something else buried beneath the words. Finality, maybe regret. She turned off the phone, threw it on the couch, and looked toward the framed photograph on the shelf. Her mother smiling in a hospital gown, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "You always said life gives second chances in strange ways," Lena whispered. "Maybe this is one of them." She spent the next morning in a daze, drifting through her routine. She took the early bus to the diner where she used to work part-time, hoping to pick up a shift, but the manager shook his head apologetically. "We let someone else take your spot, Lena." "I am sorry." By noon, she was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, watching nurses rush past, their scrubs whispering like waves. Her mother was asleep upstairs, her breathing steady but shallow. Lena traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger, the way she used to trace the edges of her dreams. The world outside the window felt distant, unreachable, like a life that belonged to someone else. She opened her bag and pulled out the silver folder. It looked out of place against the cheap plastic table, too perfect, too deliberate. She flipped through the pages again, reading the fine print carefully this time. 3 months, public appearances, no intimacy. A fixed compensation to be wired upon completion. Everything was legal, clean, cold. But then she saw something handwritten in the margin, a small note in neat, firm script. Clause 4. The contract may be terminated early if either party develops genuine affection. Her heart skipped. That line was not there before. Or maybe she had not noticed it in the blur of last night's confusion. The words were simple, almost invisible, but they changed everything. When she left the hospital, the sky had cleared. The city looked sharper in daylight, its towers glinting like promises she could not quite believe in. She took the bus home, her mind racing. For the first time in months, she felt something close to choice. At 7 p.m., she stood in front of the mirror, wearing her cleanest blouse, her hair tied back, her eyes hollow from lack of sleep but steady. The contract was tucked in her purse, folded once, no creases. By the time she reached the Hale Corporation Tower, the sun had already dipped below the skyline. The lobby glowed in gold and glass, the kind of beauty that made her feel smaller just by standing in it. The receptionist recognized her name and escorted her up to the top floor. The elevator doors opened to the same view she had seen the night before. The rain-slick city stretched out beneath them, endless and alive. Adrian stood near the window, his silhouette framed by the dying light. "I did not think you would come back," he said quietly. "I did not think I would either," she answered. Her voice trembled, but her gaze did not. "But I am here." He walked closer, his expression unreadable. "You are sure about this?" Lena nodded once. "I am sure about saving my mother. The rest, we will figure out." Adrian studied her for a moment, then handed her a pen. She took it, her fingers brushing his. The contact was brief but electric, a reminder that beneath all the clauses and signatures, 2 hearts still beat, like something that refused to be defined by ink. As she signed, the last trace of hesitation left her eyes. "Welcome to the contract, Mrs. Hale," Adrian said softly. The title sounded strange, almost too heavy for the quiet room. But as the city lights flickered to life below, Lena realized it was not just a title. It was the first step into a story she never meant to write. And somewhere deep down, in the stillness between their breaths, something fragile began to stir. The following morning arrived with the pale glow of dawn breaking over the Seattle skyline. Lena stood at the large window of the penthouse, wrapped in a robe that was far too soft, far too expensive. The air inside was silent except for the distant hum of the city below. For a moment, she forgot why she was there, until her eyes fell on the thin gold ring resting on her finger. It was simple, cold, and weightless-like, a promise made without emotion. Adrian was already dressed when she entered the dining room. He looked exactly as he had last night, precise, distant, unreadable. The table was set for two, but the space between them felt like a mile. "Good morning," she said quietly. He nodded, not looking up from his tablet. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale. I trust the staff showed you your room?" "Yes, thank you." The words came out stiff. The title still sounded wrong in her mouth. "Good. Breakfast is at 7. There is a schedule on the counter. Today we will visit the law firm to finalize the legal filing for the marriage certificate. Tomorrow we have a charity event. You will need to look the part." His tone was clipped, almost mechanical. Lena wanted to ask if he rehearsed this kind of detachment or if it came naturally. Instead, she just nodded and took a sip of the coffee the housekeeper had poured. It tasted bitter, like the start of something she was not sure she could swallow. As he read, Lena glanced around the penthouse. Everything about the place screamed perfection, sterile, flawless, unlivable. The paintings were worth more than her entire life savings, yet none of them had any warmth. She wondered if Adrian noticed the emptiness, or if he had learned to stop seeing it. When he finally spoke again, his tone softened just a fraction. "The driver will take you to the designer at noon. They will prepare outfits for the upcoming events. You only need to show up." Lena set her cup down carefully. "You really planned everything, did you not?" His lips twitched, almost a smile. "That is what I do." By afternoon, she found herself in a world she did not recognize, a world of mirrors, silk, and faint perfume. The boutique sat in the heart of downtown, where sunlight spilled through glass walls like liquid gold. A small army of stylists surrounded her, measuring, adjusting, pinning fabric against her frame. Adrian arrived halfway through the fitting, tall and composed in a tailored navy suit. The room seemed to change temperature when he walked in. Even the stylists lowered their voices. "She looks good," he said simply, his gaze sweeping over her. "Elegant, but not forced. Keep the silver dress for the gala." Lena caught her reflection in the mirror. For a second, she did not recognize herself. The woman staring back wore confidence like armor, her posture straight, her hair glossy under the lights. But behind the reflection, she saw the truth, an imposter dressed in someone else's fairy tale. When the fitting ended, Adrian walked her to the car. The silence between them was thick but not entirely uncomfortable. Halfway down the elevator, he spoke. "You handled yourself well today." She raised an eyebrow. "I stood still for 3 hours. That hardly counts as an accomplishment." "Auri," his mouth curved slightly. "You did it with dignity. That matters." It was the closest thing to a compliment she had heard from him. That evening, Lena reviewed the contract again. The clauses were now familiar, like lines in a script she was forced to memorize. No personal interference. No emotional involvement. Appear together at all scheduled events. Maintain confidentiality at all times. But there was one more line near the bottom, written in Adrian's own hand. Clause 5. The agreement may be terminated by mutual consent at any time. Her pen hovered over the page as she read it again. Mutual consent. It meant she could leave whenever she wanted. Yet she did not want to. Not yet. Something in her, something she could not explain, wanted to see where this strange bargain would lead. The next day, they sat side by side in the law office, signing papers that turned their arrangement into something legally binding. The notary congratulated them, oblivious to the truth. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger in a quiet ceremony with no witnesses but 2 signatures and the scent of ink. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Hale," the lawyer said cheerfully. Adrian nodded, his hand resting lightly on Lena's back as they left. The touch was brief, professional, but her heartbeat stumbled anyway. That night, back at the penthouse, Lena stood on the balcony, watching the lights flicker across the bay. She felt the weight of the ring again, the cold metal pressing against her skin. Behind her, the sliding door opened, and Adrian stepped out, holding 2 glasses of wine. "I thought you might need this," he said, handing her one. "Thank you," she murmured. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the rain return, soft and distant. Below them, the city pulsed like a living thing. Finally, Adrian spoke, his voice quieter than before. "You should know this is not about pity. I did not choose you to save you." Lena turned to face him. "Then why me?" He looked out over the skyline. "Because you do not want anything from me." "That is rare." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried something unspoken, something fragile, something beginning. Inside, the clock ticked past midnight. The contract was sealed, the deal official. But as their reflections met in the glass, even Adrian Hale could not ignore what he saw. The faintest flicker of warmth, a tiny fracture in the wall he had spent years building. It was not love. Not yet. But it was the first tremor of something real, and both of them felt it. The following week passed like a whirlwind. From the outside, everything about Adrian and Lena looked perfect photographs on magazine covers, headlines calling them Seattle's most unexpected power couple. Behind the glossy smiles and the elegant poses, however, lay a contract built on fragile lines and unspoken rules. Every morning began with the same routine. At precisely 7, breakfast was served in the dining room overlooking the Sound. Adrian sat at one end of the long table, reading through his phone while Lena forced herself to eat in silence. The conversations were polite but mechanical, two strangers rehearsing a script. One evening, after another public dinner filled with polite laughter and camera flashes, Adrian found Lena standing by the penthouse window, still in her silver gown. The lights of the city shimmered against the glass. She looked tired, but also thoughtful. "You did well tonight," he said. "Did I?" she asked softly. "Because it did not feel like me up there. All those people smiling, pretending to care. It felt like I was performing someone else's life." "That is the point," Adrian replied. "We are performing." Her voice broke slightly. "And who are you performing for?" His gaze lingered on her reflection in the glass. "For the board, for the investors, for everyone who believes money guarantees happiness." She turned toward him, her tone quieter now. "And do you believe that?" For the first time, he looked uncertain. "I used to." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was heavy, but not hostile. Like two people who suddenly realized they were both standing on the same fragile line. The next morning, the household staff buzzed with preparations for the upcoming Hale Foundation Galleon event expected to attract every major investor and politician in the region. Lena was to be introduced publicly as Adrian's wife for the first time. Her stylist handed her a sleek black gown that shimmered like liquid glass under the lights. As she stood before the mirror, Adrian entered the room, straightening his cufflinks. His eyes caught her reflection, and for a fleeting second, he forgot to breathe. "You look," he hesitated, searching for the right word. "Perfect." Lena smiled faintly. "You mean convincing?" He met her eyes through the mirror. "No, perfect." Number Vol. The driver arrived just as the sun began to set. The ride to the gala was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the city passing by. Lena watched the blur of lights outside while Adrian scrolled through his phone. It was strange, she thought, how easily people could sit inches apart, yet feel miles away. At the ballroom, chandeliers dripped golden light over a sea of polished shoes and sparkling gowns. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked, and whispers followed them wherever they went. Adrian guided her through the crowd with a steady hand at the small of her back, his expression unreadable, but protective. They took their seats at the front table as the master of ceremonies began the introductions. When the microphone crackled and the announcer's voice boomed, Lena's heart skipped. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host, Mr. Adrian Hale, and his wife, Mrs. Lena Hale." "Does you?" A burst of applause filled the room. Dozens of eyes turned toward them. Adrian stood, giving his signature half-smile, and extended his hand. She took it, rising beside him. For a moment, it felt real, the warmth of his palm, the glint of pride in his eyes. He spoke confidently about the foundation, about helping underprivileged youth and rebuilding communities. Then, almost unexpectedly, he turned toward her. "My wife," he said, his voice softening, "reminds me every day that compassion is the truest form of strength." The words hit Lena like a pulse. It was part of the script, she told herself. Just lines for the audience. Yet something in his tone did not sound rehearsed. As they sat back down, a reporter shouted from the crowd, "Mr. Hale, one question for the newlyweds. How about a kiss to celebrate the launch of your foundation?" Laughter rippled through the room. Cameras tilted in their direction. Adrian froze for half a second. Then, slowly, he leaned closer. His breath brushed her cheek as he whispered, "Can I kiss you?" Her heart thudded. The contract did not cover this. She could have pulled away, but she did not. The kiss was brief, gentle, and surprisingly tender. When they parted, the room erupted in applause, but neither of them smiled. They just looked at each other, quietly stunned by the truth that had slipped between them. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Lena walked out onto the balcony. The city lights stretched endlessly before her, each one a heartbeat in the dark. Adrian joined her, his tie undone, his voice low. "I know that was not part of the agreement," he said. She turned to face him. It felt real. It did, he admitted. For a moment, they stood in silence, the wind carrying the faint hum of traffic from below. Then she said softly, "Maybe it does not have to be just performance anymore." "Dogger." Adrian looked at her, the mask slipping from his face. "You think we could rewrite the contract?" "Maybe we already are," she replied. The sound of the city filled the space between them, and somewhere within that fragile quiet, two strangers pretending to be in love began to realize they were no longer pretending at all. The morning after the gala felt strangely quiet. The world outside buzzed with headlines about the kiss that stole the night, but inside the penthouse, the silence between Adrian and Lena was thick with something neither could name. Lena stood by the window, watching the fog drift over the sound. Her phone kept vibrating with messages from reporters and coworkers, but she ignored them. Somewhere between that staged kiss and the applause, something real had cracked open, and she did not know whether to fear it or protect it. Adrian entered the room, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He stopped a few feet away, studying her face. "You have been avoiding the news," he said. "I do not want to read about myself," she replied. "You should. They love you." She gave a quiet laugh. "They love the idea of me. The contract version." He hesitated before answering. Sometimes the line between real and pretend blurs. Last night proved that. Lena turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was it pretend for you?" Adrian's expression softened. "I do not know anymore." The honesty in his voice startled her more than the kiss had. For the first time since she had met him, there was no armor, no distance. He was just a man, tired, lonely, and trying to remember how to trust. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. His assistant stepped in, holding a sleek folder. "Mr. Hale, the board meeting starts in an hour. They want Mrs. Hale present as well." Lena frowned. "Me? Why?" The assistant glanced between them nervously. "Because of the article. The board thinks the marriage has boosted public confidence. They want to feature you in the new investor campaign." When the assistant left, Lena turned back to Adrian. "So now I am part of your marketing plan?" He exhaled slowly. "It is not what I want, but it may help secure the final vote. After that, we can step back." She crossed her arms. "You mean after that, we go back to pretending nothing happened?" Hull. He met her eyes, guilt flickering behind his calm. "Lena, I cannot afford distractions right now." Her chest tightened. "Then why make me one?" Without waiting for his answer, she walked out. By the time the meeting began, Lena had composed herself. The conference room was all glass and power men in tailored suits, women with diamond pens, the kind of people who measured worth in numbers. Adrian introduced her formally, his tone distant again. But when a shareholder questioned the authenticity of their marriage, something inside her shifted. She spoke with quiet strength. "You want to know if our marriage is real? Real is showing up when you have every reason not to. Real is choosing loyalty even when no one is watching. So yes, it is real enough for me." The room fell silent. Even Adrian looked at her differently, pride glinting in his eyes. Afterward, as they walked out, he said softly, "You did not have to defend me." "So, I was defending myself," she said. "And maybe us." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Adrian reached for her hand, his voice low and uncertain. "Lena, about last night, about everything, maybe I have been pretending for so long that I forgot what real feels like." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Then start remembering." Shinst. They stood there in the quiet hallway, the world still humming outside, both of them realizing that somewhere between ink and vows, their deal had already begun to rewrite itself into something neither contract nor logic could contain. That night, the rain returned. It came in sheets against the glass, the kind that drowned out every other sound except the heartbeat of the city. Lena stood on the balcony, her hair damp, her dress clinging softly to her skin. She did not move when she heard the sliding door open behind her. Adrian stepped out, still in his shirt from the meeting, sleeves rolled, tie gone. His voice was quiet. "You should come inside. It is cold." "I like the rain," she said without turning. "It makes everything honest. You cannot fake warmth when you are freezing." He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. For a long moment, they watched the skyline together, neither speaking. Then, he said, "You were incredible today. The board will not forget it. I did not do it for them." He looked at her. "Then for who?" She turned toward him, eyes bright in the dim light. "For you. For me. For the version of us that exists outside of that contract." Adrian's breath caught. The walls he had built around himself trembled. "I do not know how to exist outside of it," he admitted. "My whole life has been one negotiation after another. I am good at control, at pretending. But when it comes to you, I lose both." Relator. Lena stepped closer, the air between them charged. Maybe losing control is not always a bad thing. He reached out instinctively, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. His hand lingered near her cheek. "You should not make it this hard to stay professional." Her smile was small but real. "You signed the rules. I am just testing how strong they are." The moment hung between them, fragile and dangerous. And then, without a word, Adrian leaned in and kissed her. It was not staged, not rehearsed, not part of any agreement. It was soft, careful, and terrifyingly real. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing unevenly. Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "That was not supposed to happen," he said, voice rough. "I know," she whispered, "but it did." Days blurred into one another after that. The routine was still their public appearances, investor meetings, polite smiles, but something had changed underneath. The air around them carried unspoken tension, a gravity neither could ignore. One evening, after a long day of negotiations, Adrian found Lena in the library, sitting cross-legged on the floor between the shelves. Papers surrounded her, contracts, and financial reports. She looked up as he entered. "You are supposed to be resting," he said gently. "I wanted to understand your company better," she replied. "I thought maybe if I learned how all this works, I could help." 20. Adrian knelt beside her, scanning the spreadsheets. "You already have. You made me remember why I started this. It was never about money. It was about building something real." She smiled softly. "Then build something real with me." He stared at her for a moment, and something unguarded passed across his face, fear mixed with longing. "You make it sound easy." "Maybe it is," she said, "if we stop running from it." That night, Adrian could not sleep. He walked through the penthouse in darkness, the storm outside reflecting the one inside his mind. Every word she had said replayed like an echo. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat by the window. For years, he had built his life on control, precision, and strategy. Love had always been the one variable he refused to calculate. But now, with Lena, everything he thought he knew about control was unraveling. When he finally drifted off on the couch, he dreamt of her laughter, of her standing barefoot in the rain, of her hand reaching for his not as a contract, but as a choice. The following morning, Lena found him there, asleep with the city's light spilling over him. She covered him with a blanket and lingered, studying the man behind the armor. The faint lines of exhaustion on his face, the vulnerability in his posture. It was the first time she had seen him look human. When he opened his eyes, she was standing at the window again, the same way she had the night before. "You stayed," he said quietly. "I told you I am not running," she replied. He rose, walking to her side. "Then maybe I should stop running too." Lena turned to face him. The city stretched beyond them, endless and alive. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "that for the first time, I want something no contract can guarantee." Her heart trembled at the words. "And what is that?" Adrian looked straight into her eyes. "You." The honesty in his voice broke whatever walls still remained. Lena exhaled, a small trembling smile breaking through. "Then maybe," she whispered, "you already have me." He reached for her hand, fingers intertwining, not as employer and employee, not as business partners, but as two people who had finally stopped pretending. Outside, the storm cleared, the first rays of dawn spilling over the city. For the first time since their deal began, the silence between them felt like peace, not distance. And as they stood there, side by side, the contract that once defined them quietly began to fade into something that no paper could ever contain. Something unspoken, fragile, and true. The calm did not last long. 2 mornings later, the front page of every business paper carried the same headline. Leaked documents reveal Hale marriage was a contract. Lena froze when she saw it. The photos showed her signature on the agreement, her name beside legal terms that stripped their story of every ounce of dignity. Within hours, the company's stock dipped. Reporters camped outside the building, and social media burned with judgment. Adrian stormed into the penthouse, his jaw tight. "Who leaked it?" he demanded to his assistant, who trailed behind him pale and speechless. "Find out now." When they were alone, Lena stood in the middle of the room, holding the newspaper. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from betrayal. "You said this would stay between us." Adrian's eyes met hers. "I did not do this." "Then who did?" "Because my name is everywhere, and everyone thinks I sold myself to you." He took a step forward, lowering his voice. "Lena, I swear I will fix this." Her laugh came out broken. "Fix it? You cannot fix what people believe. They already decided who I am." She walked toward the door, her coat half on. "You can tell your board the contract is over." Adrian caught her arm, his voice trembling for the first time. "Do not go, please. Give me time to prove this was not me." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same pain mirrored in his eyes. "I wanted to believe in you," she whispered. "I really did." Then she pulled away and left. Adrian stood alone in the silence, the city below flashing with the chaos he could no longer control. For the first time, every deal, every strategy, every number felt meaningless. The woman who had turned his world right side up had walked out, and this time there was no clause to bring her back. Outside, cameras flashed as Lena disappeared into the rain, her reflection fading into the city that had once made her dream, and now just made her disappear. For 3 days, Lena vanished from the public eye. The press spun stories faster than she could breathe, each headline louder, crueler. But inside a small community center on the edge of the city, she found silence. She volunteered at the kitchen, serving coffee to strangers who never asked her name. For the first time in months, no one cared who she was married to. Back in the Hale Tower, Adrian fought to hold his empire together. The board threatened removal, investors demanded explanations, and lawyers circled like vultures. Still, every night, his thoughts returned to her. The woman who had signed a contract to help him, and ended up teaching him what love looked like when it was not for sale. On the 4th morning, Adrian walked into the press conference that his advisors begged him not to hold. Cameras clicked, lights flared, the room packed with reporters, ready to watch him fall. He stood behind the podium, shoulders squared, but voice calm. "You want the truth?" he began. "Yes, there was a contract. I wrote it. But Lena Moore never once treated it like a deal. She treated it like a promise. She gave up her privacy, her peace, and her dignity to help me protect a company that never deserved her grace." The room went silent. Adrian's voice softened. "If you want someone to blame, blame me. But do not drag her name through your headlines. She is not the villain in this story. I am." He stepped back from the podium and looked directly at the cameras. "I am resigning as CEO effective immediately. My only priority now is to find the woman who reminded me that integrity means choosing love even when it costs you everything." As he walked out of the building, flashes erupted behind him, but for the first time in years, he did not hide. Somewhere across the city, Lena would see his words, and maybe, just maybe, believe that this time, he meant them. 2 weeks later, the city had already moved on to its next scandal, but the echo of Adrian Hale's confession still lingered. His resignation speech had gone viral, turning the ruthless CEO into something no one expected: a man who chose truth over power. On a quiet afternoon, Lena finished stacking cups at the community center. The television above the counter replayed a clip from that same press conference. She froze as Adrian's voice filled the room again. "Integrity means choosing love even when it costs you everything." Her coworker smiled. That man meant every word. Talon. Lena turned off the screen, her chest tight. She told herself she was done with him, that she had closed that chapter, but her heart would not listen. She wiped her hands on her apron, grabbed her coat, and stepped outside. The air smelled like rain again, soft, clean, almost forgiving. At the same hour, Adrian stood alone at the pier overlooking the bay, the same place he had brought Lena the night they finalized their contract. He no longer wore a suit. The wind tugged at his sleeves, and for the first time, he looked free. He held a small silver folder in his hands, the original contract. The pages were creased, rain-stained, and signed in ink that had started to fade. He stared at the line where her name rested beside his, then tore the papers slowly and let them drift into the water. "I am done with business deals," he murmured. "From now on, everything real stays unwritten." He turned to leave and froze. Lena stood at the edge of the pier, her hair caught in the wind, her coat pulled close around her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said quietly, "You really did it. You gave up everything." Adrian smiled faintly. "Everything that did not matter." She stepped closer. "And what matters now?" He met her eyes, his voice steady. "You." Tears blurred her vision, but her smile broke through. "You do not have to prove anything to me, Adrian. You already did." Sibol. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, her wedding ring, the one she had left behind on his desk. The gold glinted under the soft gray light. "This time," he said, "no contracts, no rules, just us." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, her voice trembling. "Then yes." Adrian slipped the ring back onto her finger, the gesture simple and sure. As the wind lifted around them, he leaned in and whispered the same words that had started everything. "Can I kiss you?" Lena laughed softly through her tears. "You already did once, but yes, you can." Their lips met, and the world around them fell away, the city, the headlines, the rain. It was no longer a performance or a clause in a deal. It was real, raw, and completely theirs. When they finally parted, the sun broke through the clouds, scattering gold across the water. Lena rested her head on his shoulder. "So what now?" Adrian smiled, looking out at the horizon. "Now," he said, "we start from the truth." And for the first time since that fateful night in the penthouse, both of them felt what they had been chasing all along: peace, not perfection; love, not transaction. The sound of the waves filled the silence between them, and as they stood hand in hand, the story that began as a contract ended as something far greater, a promise that needed no signature.